Welcome back to GEMS Podcast. I'm your host, Genesis Amaris Kemp, and with me today is Mike Chisholm. And here's a bit about Mike. He's the host of HeCast, the official podcast of HeChangedIt, a show dedicated to men's mental wellness. He is also the co-author of personal development memoir, She Changed Me. One Ordeal, Two Perspectives. The book he penned along with his wife chronicling the life lessons they learned during their then 18-month-old granddaughter's fight with cancer. Mike is an entrepreneur and has built a business in the financial services industry and spent over 20 years. Yes, you heard me. 20 years in the marketing department and as a corporate trainer for Costco Wholesale. He also helped raise over $250,000 for local charity as a co-founder and co-promoter of Invasion Championship Wrestling, a self-described student of personal development and entertainment. Mike uses his dynamic personality, relentless positive attitude, and superior skills at building rapport and relationships to inspire and motivate people to live better lives. And without further ado, please welcome Mike Chisholm to GEMS Podcast.
Genesis, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure, Mike. And today we're going to unpack a bit of a spin on things here because your wife is actually building a men's mental wellness app. And so she's building it as a woman, but building it on topics that males need. So let's walk through, how did that even become a thing? And what are some of the things that you're learning alongside with your wife as this is going on in the background?
Yeah, it's very cool to be in the front seat watching my wife do this, my wife and her team of people. She believes that it's her life purpose to build He Changed It. And there's all sorts of other stuff coming down the path as well with She Changed It and We Changed It and They Changed It. But she started with men's mental wellness. My wife had a phenomenal run in the not-for-profit sector. And she was watching families be helped and in her role, helping people, who needed to get brought back on their feet a little bit. And she saw that there was a lot of support for women. There was a lot of support for children, but every once in a while she would have men coming and saying, hey, we got no resources. We have no, there's no support for us out here, whether it was a single father, whether it was somebody who was down on their luck, whatever it was. And so one night I was working in my home office at, it was about 2 a.m. I was working on some stuff for a presentation, and my wife had been startled out of sleep, and she came into my office and she looked at me and she goes, I think I know what my life's purpose is. And she had just recently gotten out. She got a little burned out in the nonprofit sector, as many people do. It's tireless work. And she said, he changed it. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she goes, I need to create a place where men can go and they can find all sorts of resources for their mental wellness, for their physical wellness. I don't like the way the culture is going. I don't like the world that my two boys are inheriting, because of stigma, because of, the Me Too movement had happened. And there's a lot of men who get caught in the crossfire of being either villainized or criticized for things that they did decades ago when the culture was different. And she just said the only way, and this is the way I look at it too, she's a mother, and she wanted to birth this thing that would help men. And don't get me wrong, she's a woman tech founder, but her team is full of men. It's not like it's a women-led initiative. It just is the fact that it's more of a mother-led initiative. And as she's built He Changed It, I mean, she started going down the rabbit hole doing research. The World Health Organization calls men's mental health wellness a silent crisis. 3 out of 4 suicides are middle-aged men. in North America. A lot of people don't know that. And there's a lot of men living quiet lives of desperation. And she wants to create a resource that obliterates that. And then, because at the end of the day, the stronger men, the stronger fathers we have, the stronger husbands we have, the stronger men that are out there, men of character, that is going to trickle down to everybody else and the entire culture. And so big goals, big dreams, wants to save the culture and improve the culture.
Beautiful. And then why did she stick with the name He Changed It? I know she was startled, and she got up and came to you and like, oh, here's the idea. But what is so significant with the name He Changed It? And how does that weave into HeCast?
That's a great question. Well, HeCast is the official podcast of He Changed It. And when I have all sorts of guests on the podcast, everybody from life coaches to therapists to physical trainers, filmmakers, broadcasters, athletes, from all sorts of walks of life. And at the end of the day, I think that that's really, they say that humans fear change. And I certainly have felt that. I'm sure you felt that. And, you've gone through changes in your life and getting to know you. I mean, my goodness, some of the adversity that you've gone through. And I think that it's the Chinese that look at change and opportunity. They look at those as the same thing, but that's not a North American standard. I don't think we look at it that way. I think many times when people look at the word change, they don't necessarily look at it as a positive thing. But at the end of the day, if anybody were to look back in their life at the times where they've leveled up, it's always involved change. And so the idea of He Changed It is, I'm over here. I want to be up here. The only way that's going to happen is if I change something. What might that be? We are trying to provide resources. Certainly with HeCast, we're trying to provide insights, other people's stories that can then permeate into other men's into their environment, and they can maybe open themselves up to the idea of improving themselves. So it's a transformative process, and it's fun to watch people level up.
I like how you mentioned it's a transformative process, because transformation plus transition is my personal bomb explosion, because I'm like TNT. So I was like, let's see how I'm blowing up. So I'm blowing up whenever I transition, but in that transition, transformation is coming, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, or personally versus professionally. And with HeCast, you said you have a bunch of varieties of people from different walks of life coming on to really share their expertise and put that out in the universe to help other people. So with the name HeCast, was it done intentionally? Because if someone sees the name HeCast, they're like, oh, maybe it's only for men because he's casting a spell or he's casting his dreams or whatever. So let's break down the name HeCast.
It's funny. As you mentioned in the bio, I was a marketing guy and built a nice little financial service business where I'm at. I think though that at the end of the day, if you were to go back and really take the fences away from how I was brought up. I was brought up, hey, go get a good job with good benefits and keep that job as long as you could. And the people who brought me up, my entire family, well-meaning with that. But at the end of the day, I wasn't really given the keys to the car of jumping on the road to say, okay, go, what are your goals and dreams? What would you, if you could do anything, what could you do? Broadcasting is the thing. If I could go back and talk to that guy, I would like to move in the direction of a guy like David Letterman. I'm a huge fan of certain broadcasters, Letterman being probably the top of the heap. I love what Rogan's doing and some of these other people. And so when podcasting showed up, it really leveled the playing field. So HeCast is a reflection of course, male is the audience. However, it's not just males who listen to the show. We've got actually quite a few females who listen to the show too, who are also interested in maybe helping the males that are in their lives, or want to hear the insights or some of the stories that some of these guys tell, because at the end of the day, men aren't really well known for being vulnerable. And we break that down. Vulnerability is like the key to all, it's the keystone to the avalanche of transformation. It really is. And so, putting he, and then the idea that I could turn into a broadcaster, a podcaster. So HeCast, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. Plus, as they build out the rest of the empire, HeCast will show up, WeCast will show up, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun watching this thing get built. That literally was the genesis, for lack of a better term, of my wife. A little kernel of an idea has spun into this big thing, and you ain't seen nothing yet. The app is still just in beta. People can go to HeChangedIt.com and they can download the app already, but what you get right now is just teeny tiny compared to what it's going to be. Just like with HeCast. I mean, we've got over 100 episodes in the can and some really, really good stuff, but boy, do we have some big plans.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see how the transformation is really going to take place, because there's a lot. And I like how y'all are sticking with he changed it, she changed it, we changed it, they, because whenever I hear it out loud, it really shows the diversity, the equity, the inclusion, and belonging. And then now to see it, once that's done, then you're going to see it on the podcast side. And I think that's really cool. So with men's mental health and wellness, how can we really get men to be transparent and vulnerable and talk about certain things without feeling like there's a negative stigma that is surrounding it? Because there are plenty of, celebrities and icons that do go through mental health challenges. And I know now, more than ever, some of them are speaking up and really sharing it with the world. And I know one of our comedians, a few years ago, he ended his life via suicide. So the guy that played Miss Doubtfire, and it was like, oh my gosh, yeah, Robin Williams. And it took everyone by surprise, because you never knew that he was dealing with certain things until after the fact. But what about if someone, had intervened and said, hey, is there anything that I could do for you? Is there something you would like to talk about? Or maybe if your app was, already developed back then, what would that look like?
Well, and Candy has talked to my wife Candace. She's talked to all sorts of folks. One of the people that we've got some footage from, and we got to figure out how we're going to use it, is it's one of the highest officials in the Canadian military. And he has talked about mental wellness, and there's unfortunately, you get these soldiers who come home from active duty, and certainly this is the same in the States as well, where there are some guys who can't cope with what they've seen. And that's unfortunately that final horrible decision that gets made. And the quote that this he was a general. I forget his position off the top of my head right now, but he's the guy who's in charge of this stuff and trying to make things better in the military for mental health. And he said, you know what, every single one of them that dies has a phone in their pocket. And again, what Candy and her team are building isn't a suicide prevention app in the sense of its focus, but it is a sense that there are so many people that get to that final decision, but it took a lot of steps to get to that place. And what if during those steps, there could be some sort of an intervention, some sort of a disruption. And at the end of the day, that's what HeChangedIt is all about. And you talk about the stigma, you talk about men, reaching out, and we haven't been encouraged to do that. We've been encouraged to, and I'll tell you this, we want to take back the phrase man up, because I think the phrase man up is not in how many people think of that phrase. I don't think it's a healthy connotation, hey, just man up, stop crying, take it, just bury it down. Don't deal with it. That's in my mind, that is how man up has been positioned. And we want to take it back. We want manning up to be, no, hold on. If you want to man up, talk about where you're at. If you're not happy with things, if you're feeling anxious about things, if there are things, manning up is actually talking about it. It's being able to be vulnerable. Sometimes being vulnerable is just listening. That's why HeCast is so important. If you get a guy who's gone through some horrific shit, some horrific stuff, I apologize for cursing there, some horrific things, and they talk about it. Somebody who's listening to some of those horrific things that can maybe relate might be able to make different decisions. And that's really the heart of it. You asked the question about the stigma, how we get past that. The idea of He Changed It is that men can come to this app, and the community is small right now. It's just being built. But the goal is that men can take something that they need or leave something that they know. Taking something that you need for a guy, that can be a real ego thing. That could be a really hard thing to do, being vulnerable, to be taking something that you need. But leaving something that you know, men intrinsically do that for each other. Not just each other, but for everybody. I mean, it's even gone to the point where it's being stereotyped as mansplaining. But at the end of the day, many men have a desire. If they see somebody painting a fence and they're doing it in a way that could be done better, many times we'll just go over and give advice and say, hey, you know what? I did my fence 3 months ago. I found that this cut down the time and this was a better paint or whatever, right? That's being vulnerable too. So when you leave something that you know, you're actually opening yourself up and being vulnerable a little bit. You just don't realize you're doing it. So the idea of being able, of guys who have gone through stuff, being able to share things that they've gone through, for guys who need to take some of that, that's really what it's all about. And it's creating a culture of vulnerability. And we believe that that is, again, like I said, the keystone to the avalanche of change.
I like that because it sounds like all the bases will be covered. And let's
Yeah.
talk about some stressors that can, influence men's mental wellness, like finances, relationship
Yep.
issues, becoming a father. Because if you've never had a child, you may not necessarily know what to do, and then your life is changing because now there's a person that you are responsible with. Career changes, burnt out, mental fatigue, that exhaustion, even sometimes weight issues. So, weight gain and weight loss can also contribute to how a man is feeling. And if he begins to internalize all of that and not seek help, whether it's via a community group or some friends or a paid professional, then we start to see different forms of mental health and mental wellness on the brink, because there's other factors, and those environmental stressors as well as those personal stressors that are contributing to sending him over edge. So with you being in this arena, what are some of the other stressors from a male perspective that you've seen?
Well, I got to tell you, Genesis, you're nailing it. You're extremely insightful. All of the things that you just listed there are pain points. There's no question about that. And I'm glad that you kind of finished with body image. Body image actually is near one of the team behind He Changed It did a ton of research on this, and these pain points, all the ones that you just mentioned, were there, and body image was actually really high on the list. Now, I mean, when you are to look at the stereotypes in North America, if you were to say which gender or which group of people, body image is the issue. I think stereotypically many people would think, oh, women. I mean, they've built $1 trillion industries around the health and beauty and all of these industries. But at the end of the day, men many times are sitting in the background and not talking about the inadequacies that they feel when it comes to body issues and things like that. So I'm really glad that you actually, you picked out a massive part of the list with it was extremely insightful, but that's an important one. And that's one that people don't necessarily realize. The other ones that if I were to throw out there, that you might not have naturally kind of gravitated towards, loneliness is a huge one. It's a massive one. It's feeling needed and being needed. and appreciated, and it's all wrapped into and loneliness as well. And then the other one is purpose, or lack of purpose, and that's what I'm seeing. Like, I'm 40, just turned 46, and I'm seeing that with my Gen X compatriots here. I'm seeing it happen right now, where I got a lot of guys in my circle, personally and then professionally, as it's kind of spread out and I've gone down this path, where they have done the connect the dots that they were told to do. They've got their degree, or they got the wife, or they got the job, they got the kids, they got all these things, and they did what they were supposed to do. And now they're sitting there in their mid to late 40s, early 50s, whatever, and they're realizing that they don't know what their purpose is. They haven't been fulfilled, and they've never even articulated or had articulated to them the concept of what do I do with my life that's going to fulfill me from the inside out. It just hasn't been done. They've just been task oriented their whole life. And that can be really damn scary, coming to grips with the fact that you don't know what your purpose is. And so, of all the lists that you mentioned, absolutely, loneliness, purpose, are also some of these things. So we got a big job ahead of us to try and create resources and a culture where guys can go and explore this stuff. And that's what that's the goal. That's what we want to do.
And it's so needed, because I feel like sometimes men, you get together over sports events, and the sports event, that's a way to mask certain problems. But what about if in the sports event you talked about real life issues, like, oh man, okay, I'm struggling with some finances here, and then someone says, oh well, I have a really great financial advisor, or just different things around that. Like, let's not just make it all about sports, but let's put some substance in there, because we're already going to be spending an hour to 2 hours together. And yes, it's a good way to get their mind off of certain things that's going on in the background and at home. But then whenever you leave that sports event and that function, you still have those same problems.
Yeah, it's funny. A very specific example that's very similar to what you're talking about just happened a little while ago. A friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, he owned a junior hockey team. In Canada, hockey's religion up here, right? And he owned a junior hockey team with a couple other guys, and so he passed away, and it was a big deal when that happened. There were 4 members of that team, the marketing guy, one of the co-owners, the coach, and somebody else, the administration of the team. They all went out for lunch a few weeks after he passed. And I was telling one of these gentlemen about HeChangedIt. And he's like, oh, that's interesting, but I'm not sure it's going to fly because of, he's old school. He's an old school guy, stigmatized, very, very much so. And he called me up, and after they all went for lunch, and he goes, hey, I see why HeChangedIt's being built. I'm like, really? And I'm just going to make up the guy's name. Let's say the guy's name is Todd. He goes, the 4 of us just went for lunch, and we're all just dying inside because of losing Todd. And not one of us brought him up. And it was, this lunch of these guys who, for all intents and purposes, if you write it down on paper, these are the guys that should be talking to each other about dealing this stuff. My wife talks about this all the time. She's like, me and my girlfriends and women in general, we always are tossing around. If we're going through stuff, we're tossing it around and dealing with it by talking about it. Just getting it out is a portion of dealing with it. And my buddy was saying, yeah, we're all dying inside because of this. And we didn't even bring it up during this lunch where we all went out to lunch together. It was a small table, it was private, and none of us brought up Todd's name even once. And that was telling for me. So yeah, it's great to have these bonding experiences and things, but if we can add some depth to that, we're going to take a lot of, the pressure balloon is so full, and it's so full that it could burst, and doing things like what you were talking about takes some air out of the balloon, and it really makes things easier. So yeah, you're bang on as far as I'm concerned.
And I'm sorry for the loss of your friend. It's never easy losing your friend. And it's sad to see that they were in an intimate session and no one felt the need to talk about this quote unquote Todd. But then it could also be the way that men are wired in general. And I'm going to make this statement, but I don't mean to offend anyone if I do. So I went to this one church setting, and it said women are like noodles because we could be all over the place and interweave ourselves in different situations, whether personally or professionally. And men, since they are fixers by nature, they're like waffles and they like to compartmentalize everything. So do you feel that with men having the makeup that they have and liking to just be the fixer of everything, do you feel like that takes away from them engaging and opening up in situations like this?
I love the example. I think it's totally right. I heard a similar analogy talking about, women being like a ball of wires, while guys are like a card catalog from a library, and I think that that's true to an extent. Like, I mean, I think it was a comedian that I heard say that. And I think when comics talk about stuff like that, there's always a shred of being relatability. And I relate to the compartmentalizing as a man, the way that I think. I relate to what you just said. But there's no reason why we can't make one of those compartments about being vulnerable. There's no reason why we can't make one of those compartments about the benefits of just deep breathing when stress starts to hit, and creating some of these. That's the beautiful thing about being a man and thinking compartmentalized, is that if we fill some of those compartments with tactics and exercises and knowledge and insights about how to deal with some of this stuff, great. It's just another compartment that when it's needed, we can pull it out and we can use it when one of the other compartments is exploding or doing something else. Right. So I would definitely agree with the analogy, and think that we can use that as power to fix some of these things, so we can let that pressure out of the balloon.
Amazing. And I guess one thing that, as you were speaking, that came to my head is with this app, one thing that I would love to see in this app for men is having a section where they take time to either meditate or practice mindfulness, where they are slowing down, working on their breath work, and just really being one with themselves. Because when you really take time to do the inward work, then it's going to help you connect externally with the world around you, and you won't feel like you have so much weight on your shoulders. And then you could ask yourself, is this going to matter a year from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now? And if not, then why am I so focused on this particular subject or this particular situation? And sometimes you may not be able to find that out if you're busy trying to stay busy and not being intentional with the busyness that you're doing.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And I mean, I know that for me personally, meditation has changed my life. Even learning how to deep breathe has changed my life. And the pondering that you're talking about is so needed. And I don't think it's just a man thing. I think that's a human thing. I just think it hasn't been accessed as freely for men. And this is exactly what HeChangedIt's all about, is sharing this stuff. So guys can make these changes with simple tools. At the end of the day, what you're talking about is actually very simple, but change sometimes is one of those things that we fear, and we're back to we've come full circle when it comes to that. And that's sometimes it takes the example of seeing somebody doing it, or seeing somebody teach others how to do it, so they can take it, ponder it, massage it around. Is this right for me? And that's really what the community is going to be all about, is being able, iron sharpens iron, right? And when iron sharpens iron, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the phrase, but I'm also a huge fan of the process. And it sounds really good, iron sharpens iron is a fantastic analogy. You take two pieces of iron, and by the time they're done with each other, right, they're both better off than they were. Now, the one thing that we forget sometimes is when iron is sharpening iron, that process, there's explosions of sparks, there is explosions of noise, there is conflict sometimes that leads to that being done. But at the end of the day, what happens? Those pieces of iron are better off than they were beforehand.
Yes. And now, as we begin to wind down our segment, and we've dropped so many incredible nuggets of wisdom throughout it, I want you to leave the listeners as well as the viewers with 1 to 2 gems to really help them ignite and find their inner spark so they can glow up.
Sure. I appreciate that. You know what? Here's the one that I'm gonna throw out there as a lesson that I've learned. I learned it when we were down at BC Children's Hospital for 5 months. We were transplanted away when the most precious member of our family, my granddaughter, who is my everything. She's my best little friend in the whole world. We have a phenomenal relationship. She went through a bout of cancer when she was 18 months old. And while we were down there, there were a lot of life lessons that I learned. We talk about that in the book. And I'll tell you, the one that nailed me the most is self-care. And I think that there's so many guys out there who do not practice self-care, many times because of the list of tasks that they have to do, that card catalog of compartmentalized lists of things that we feel that we have to do, whether we're taking care of our family, whether we're taking care of friends, whatever that might be. We forget to take care of ourselves. And I'll tell you, sometimes my wife says this all the time. Sometimes a blessing comes like a kick in the teeth. I learned that lesson the hard way because I almost burned out while we were down there. And it was because I felt unworthy and I felt guilty about taking opportunities. I'm a big stand-up fan. And while we were down in Vancouver, again, strangers in a strange land, Bill Burr came to town and my buddy said, "Hey, I'm getting you out of your hospital. I'm getting you out all this stuff. You got your stepson and your daughter-in-law, and you got your wife to take care of the baby. I'm getting you out for an evening." And took me to Bill Burr. And I remember feeling guilty about going. And what I learned at the end, if I could redo that entire experience again, I would tell myself, and because I did learn this, no, that was what fills up my cup again. If I want to hydrate others, I have to put water into my cup. And there are so many guys out there that are living so close to the edge. And it's like, no. Hey, listen, you need to do the things that you love to do, whether it's the little things or something bigger. Even if it's just a few hours, you need to do that. You need to take care of yourself, because if you take care of yourself, you'll be powered up to do all the things that are in those compartments. And that was a huge thing for me. So, I mean, I was maybe, I don't know. I don't know if there was 2 gems in there or not, but that one gem there is the thing that I think was the most important. I mean, there's all sorts of things about people's perceptions and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, we can do this again anytime you want. I really appreciate what it is that you're doing, Genesis, and we can do this anytime. But that one there is the one that, as you asked that question, that's the one that overwhelmingly came out of me, is self-care. Loving yourself, learning to love yourself, learning to take care of yourself and fill your cup, paramount.
And that is such a beautiful as well as a vital gem to share, because I always like to say self-care is the best care. And if you forget that, just think about whenever you are traveling on an aircraft and they give you the safety speech, they tell you to put on your mask first before you assist others. Because if you don't put on your mask and you can't breathe, how are you going to go over there to assist your neighbor? And that neighbor may be your spouse, your partner, your children, or etc. And if you're losing oxygen, you're not going to be able to help them and save a life. And now I want you to leave us with your personal call to action for this segment,
Sure.
and then close us out with your website and where you hang out on social media.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you like what I'm talking about, anybody who's out there that hears this, head to HeChangedIt.com and you can check out He Changed It. The app is actually available in both app stores, the Apple Store and the Google Store. You can download it now. Now it's in beta still. Like you can download it, you can sign up. There's dozens of guys every day who are in the app using the resources in there. Come on in, be an early adopter, because it is a fraction of what it's going to be. It's fun to watch some of these things, how they grow and how they evolve. It's going to be really fun to watch how the He Changed It and all of the other stuff that comes from this evolves. So go to HeChangedIt.com, check it out. If you want to get to know me a little bit more, I do post on the Instagram. I'm more of a Facebook guy, but at Shazamike, SHAZAMIKE. And if you're interested in our book at all, it's called She Changed Me, One Ordeal, Two Perspectives. There's my side of it right there, talking about the life lessons that we learned when our granddaughter was going through this. And there's my wife's side right there, both meeting in the middle after learning the lessons that we learned with my granddaughter coming home safe. And you can go to shechangedme.com if you want to look at that, or go to the Amazons or the Walmart.coms or whatever. It's all available there as well. Genesis, I just want to say thank you very much for being a light in the world. Thank you for doing this show and all of the things that you are bringing to light that are helping so many others. It's been a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you so much, Mike, and just coming down and just sharing your experience with the world and helping bridge and connect the dots. And for all you listeners and viewers out there, I want to encourage you that mental health starts with all of us playing our part. There's no negativity that should be surrounded by it, because each one of us are striving to be better versions on a daily basis. So whenever life throws you that curveball, just get your bat and get ready to knock it out the park, because that home run is just on the other side of you hitting that ball. So never feel like you're in a predicament that you can't get out. And if it makes it any easier, think about the word breakthrough and dissect it in two parts. Yes, you may be broken for a moment, but you're going to make it through. And that's why we have breakthrough experiences that then turn into our testimonies. And until we chat next time, peace, love, and lots of blessings. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, can be found on 40 plus platforms, and our YouTube content, which is Gems with Genesis Amaris Kemp, for all video content.